Look, this is gonna be. I'm excited. Look, Leonard, Leonard and Preston have shown over the last several rounds that we've watched them that they have an incredible ability to make adjustments, just in their play style. You know, like the one thing that I really admire about the KC area is that there's a lot of positioning based play. And there's decision making based on putting yourself in a position for not the next turn, and maybe not even 2 turns down the road, but like finding a way 3 turns down the road to be in a good position.
Yeah, that's a good point. We've definitely seen that so far today. I think especially Preston in that last set. You know, a lot of times he was, like tailwinding when he could have taken a knockout, but by tailwinding he put himself in a position where he had 3 turns where he could start pressuring offense instead of just 1 and then losing momentum. And so that's a really good point.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting that each format of VGC kind of focuses on different skill sets, right? So one big example that I pick from like 2016, for example, right? It's really easy to pick on 2016 for being a very difficult format for people to get into and understand. But there was one specific skill that I think a lot of people needed to learn for 2016, and that was like preserving knockouts, right? And so I'm not sure exactly what I would say that 2018's skill is that it really focuses on. But when you look at 2016, like there were people that would come from 2015, go straight into 2016, and it was all about maintaining momentum and in 2015 and like getting as many knockouts as quickly as possible. Right. And you would see in like 2016 that people would just get like they'd knock out the first 2 Pokemon, which were basically sacrificial fodder to set up a team for a late game sweep, and then you would just watch this reverse steamroll. So like it's kind of interesting to see some of these players that, and especially in Kansas City, kind of excelled in 2016. Like we saw Leonard that did really well at US Nationals in 2016. And then we saw Ethan did really well late 2016, especially when you get into like his Evital usage. Yeah. And then John Masters qualified for Worlds. And I mean, like you see a lot of these players from the Kansas City area that made it to Worlds and I mean had decent performances throughout 2016. And again, I attribute that personally to a certain amount of their positioning-based play and their recognition of when it's beneficial to like not take a KO.
That's a really good point. Sometimes taking a KO is available to you, while it may be tempting, it could potentially put you in a spot where you give your opponent a free switch into something, and then you're thinking, oh wow, maybe I shouldn't have just wiped that off the field immediately.
And it looks like Leonard did win game 1. So we are 1-0 in Leonard's favor. Unfortunately, we don't know exactly how that game played out. But the tournament organizer has given permission to pause so that we can fix the stream. And so Leonard is in the process of fixing that, as you can kind of see on stream. But, yeah. So, what kind of adjustments would you like to see from Preston going into game 2?
I would like to see a functioning stream. I don't know about you.
Just as an update for everybody, we were given prizing information. Top 4 players, what was it?
$20. $20 and 32 CP. Second place gets $40 and 40 CP, and then first place gets $80 and 50 CP.
So that's actually pretty good pricing. Collector's Cash with... I'm actually kind of impressed by that. It makes me wish that I had played more Collector's Cash mid-seasons when I was in the Kansas City area. But...
Looks like Leonard's giving us a rundown of Game 1. Leonard said that Preston led Landorus and Gardevoir into Leonard's Mence and Aegislash, and Preston had Zapdos and Aegislash in the back, while Leonard had Amoonguss and Tapu Fini.
So, looking at that, I mean, that's actually a little bit of a change-up from Preston, understanding that his apparently standard lead-out of Zapdos and Gardevoir might be countered or capable to be countered by Leonard. So Leonard making an adjustment, and it seems like Leonard has made adjustments to his leadouts almost every game, if I'm correct.
I think it. I'm pretty sure he didn't bring this combination of these 4 before, so it's very possible he's been trying to mix it up and keep Preston guessing.
So having Zapdos and Aegislash in the back, I think that we can be fairly confident that Preston is a little bit worried about his Aegislash being slower than Leonard's, because we saw that Preston wanted to protect his Aegislash and set up a Tailwind in the last round of Swiss. So that might indicate a few things. And then keeping Zapdos in the back while leading Landorus, trying to get an Intimidate off on whatever Leonard wanted to lead. So, definitely interesting seeing that Leonard was able to, again, change up just a little bit. He brought the same 4 that won him Game 1 in the last round of Swiss, bringing that Tapu Fini adjustment that we were talking about in the last round, and able to pull out that game.
Yep, so we are going to jump right into Game 2 here. Just a reminder.
Brewing coffee. You see it? You see it?
I see it now, yeah.
Yeah, it looks like we're on a percolator just brewing coffee away.
Yeah, so as a reminder, Leonard is up 1-0. He's going to be using this team of Tapu, Koko, Amoonguss, Incineroar, Aegislash, Tapu Fini, and Salamence, while Preston has the Gardevoir, Landorus, Politoed, Zapdos, Aegislash, and Incineroar.
And so going into Game 2, it looks like the pressure's a little bit on Preston, and we have seen in previous matches that losing that first game for him might make him rush a little bit in the first couple turns, but he does regain composure as he continues to play. So I think that, again, this is just something that we see out of the Kansas City area, is people being able to make adjustments and fight for positioning.
Definitely the case. I think that both of these players, again, are very capable of winning this set. We did see in the previous match in Swiss, I believe Leonard won Game 1 and then lost 2 and 3 in Swiss as well. So it's definitely possible for Preston to replicate that here. But Leonard obviously wanted to close it out here and not give Preston that chance.
All right, so both players taking a good amount of time here to make their selections. They're definitely thinking through everything, even with that small break, wanting to spend every moment that they had available to try and think through and flowchart things. And Preston giving us yet another look here at an intro. So now we've got Incineroar, another Intimidator next to Gardevoir, similar to Game 1 of Finals, but just a little bit different.
Yeah, so this Incineroar now getting the Intimidate off onto Leonard's Salamence and threatening the Aegislash pretty heavily with something like a Flare Blitz. Kind of an interesting mix-up from Preston, because I don't think he had been bringing Incineroar for the past few games, but knowing that Leonard is going to be bringing this Aegislash, it's a good choice for him, because Incineroar is a pretty good check to Aegislash, considering it resists both of the Steel and Ghost type moves that Aegislash usually runs.
Yeah, so Salamence is going to go ahead and switch out here, not wanting to take a Fake Out, not wanting to take a Hyper Voice. Intimidate from Leonard's Incineroar coming out, so that's going to reduce the amount of damage, but Incineroar on Preston's side also switching out for another Intimidate. So just returning the favor from Leonard's Incineroar. Leonard wanting to get an Intimidate on Preston's Incineroar, but getting intimidated on his side instead. So Gardevoir is going to Mega Evolve here. We'll have to see what choice it makes if it wants to protect, and it does, trying to make sure that it doesn't eat a full-powered Z move here. And Leonard taking advantage of that, knowing that his opponent may not want to take a full-powered Z move and hiding behind a substitute here.
From Leonard, the Incineroar coming in on his end meant that his Aegislash, would be able to survive an attack from that Incineroar on Preston's end, because it would be at that -2 attack. Even though it switched out, it's still a great substitute there, because now it's safe from something like a Tectonic Rage from the Landorus, and obviously Gardevoir won't be doing much damage to a Shield form Aegislash.
And what's really cool here is that Leonard bringing in this Incineroar, he's got a fresh Fake Out, Gardevoir just protected, so it's very unlikely that it would be able to get another Protect off. Preston understanding that, brings out his own Incineroar. Again, just trying to protect that Gardevoir from taking any high-powered Ghost Z moves. And then Landorus feeling the same way. Hey, I don't want to take a Fake Out. I don't want to take any Ghost Z moves. Just making sure that he protects there. And Aegislash, the only Pokemon on the field that's going to make a strong offensive here, and going for Shadow Ball, which will be resisted by Preston's Incineroar.
It's resisted, but that's a good chunk of damage. It's any little damage on the Incineroar helps, because with that Intimidate and Fake Out, it's a really annoying Pokemon to be facing down. Now that this Aegislash, it's still behind a Substitute. It isn't that Blade form now, but I believe we've seen that it's faster than Preston's Incineroar, so if it wants to get off an attack this turn, it will definitely be able to. The Landorus won't be able to go for Tectonic Rage into it because of that Substitute. And Leonard actually has a pretty safe switch into his own Salamence here on the Incineroar slap, because even if the Landorus goes for something like a Rock Slide, that Intimidator will help mitigate that damage output.
Absolutely. And we've got Aegislash here, capable of going for a Ghost EMZ maybe on that Landorus. He's got a few opportunities, but one thing that I wanted to point out is that Incineroar took a decent chunk of damage, as you mentioned, from that Shadow Ball, which might indicate, which I don't think that we saw in the previous set, that this Incineroar is not Assault Vest, which might say that it's got maybe a Pinch Berry back there.
Seen this Incineroar use Protect, so that definitely confirms the lack of an Assault Vest. But I don't think we've actually seen the item on that Incineroar at all yet.
And so we do have that King Shield, and it looks like we are frozen on our end. I'm not sure if we're going to have it frozen on your end here. The stream is catching up here. And it looks like, yep, we are in a complete freeze here. But, we're coming back.
Oh, there we go. There's something.
We're coming back. We are back. All right, so we've got Landorus and Incineroar out here with Aegislash and Salamence. And we're just kind of waiting for both of these players to make their moves here. Looks like Leonard has plugged in his move, and Preston is just taking a little bit more time to make his decision.
I'm wondering what Preston went for in that turn, because we did see the Aegislash King Shield and no damage onto the Salamence. Mm-hmm. So it might be possible that Preston went for something like a double knockoff into the Aegislash, trying to knock it out.
Mm-hmm. Really, and that would definitely be interesting, because if that was the case with that King Shield, would have reduced the damage output on both Salamence and that Incineroar, right, because those are contact moves. So it looks like Landorus going for that Protect, and now we've got the stance change off of Aegislash going on the offensive here. It looks like a Shadow Ball, really preserving the Z move from Leonard here.
I think that's smart. We saw the earlier, I think it was either game 2 or 3 of the previous set, where the Never-Ending Nightmare from Aegislash actually missed the knockout on Landorus. So he wants to save that Z move to either use on the Gardevoir, which we know can take a Shadow Ball, or potentially save for Landorus at a later stage.
Again, I just want to highlight the fact that we have seen very little damage on Pokemon so far. Both players just really playing extremely defensively, trying to get themselves in a good position. And again, this Landorus switching out is another indicator of these players trying to find their way into a good damage-dealing position a few turns down. Incineroar coming out, getting an Intimidate, reducing the amount of frustration damage it's going to take from this Salamence. And now a Shadow Ball coming out of Aegislash into Preston's slower Aegislash and doing a huge amount of damage and reducing its special defense. We've got a Pinch Berry, it looks like, activating, so that should bring him up over half health, and it does. That Figgy Berry. And Aegislash on Preston's side is going to go on the offensive, so no Z move out of Preston's Aegislash, but it looks like he's going to be able to break that Substitute.
Break the sub, but he's still in kind of a rough spot here, because Leonard, we've seen his Aegislash is faster than Preston's. It definitely will be able to knock it out, or Leonard will be able to knock out Preston's Aegislash with his own Shadow Ball. And a frustration from the Salamence will knock out the Incineroar. And so, Preston's best Aegislash switch-in is now on the field. And so Preston has to be careful with what his Aegislash slap does, because for something like a King Shield, that's fine. He'll survive the turn, but his Incineroar is being threatened by the Salamence pretty heavily, and so there's not really a way for him to get a bunch of damage off onto Leonard's Aegislash this turn.
Absolutely. And so we've seen a lot of really good positioning battles, and it seems like Leonard has, for the time being, at least one temporarily. Preston is going to push it on the offensive, or on the defensive side, get this Landorus out here, try and reduce the damage output from this Salamence. And it looks like Salamence is going to go straight for that frustration into Incineroar. Preston allowing that Incineroar to go down without any switches. And then Leonard going back for that substitute, just trying to keep that thing behind a substitute so that it can take a couple extra shots.
No, this is definitely a great display of positioning from Leonard. You know, the Zapdos on Preston's end actually left behind this game. And so this Salamence, it will always be the fastest thing on the field unless the Gardevoir has something like, Trick Room. But at this point, it would be really hard for Gardevoir to even set up the Trick Room because, the Aegislash is behind a substitute. It hasn't burned its Z move yet, and so it has that, Never-Ending Nightmare option into the Gardevoir. And so, Leonard doing a very good job of putting himself in a spot where he has very safe, KO options. Like we saw that last turn. There's no way for Preston to damage that Aegislash at all, because if he fakes out the Salamence, this Aegislash was able to get a Shadow Ball off into his own Aegislash or set up a substitute or something like that. And so it's a great display of Leonard so far in this game.
Yeah, so Incineroar is coming back out. Gardevoir is going to protect, trying to avoid any Shadow Balls or any Ghostium Zs. Leonard is saying, you know what, I don't want any Earthquakes on this Aegislash. I need the substitute to stay intact, and I don't want to sacrifice any more HP. This Protect from Gardevoir has been used before so that he can Earthquake pretty freely, which would put Incineroar at a huge risk, but after Intimidate might reduce a little bit of damage. We see that Earthquake now coming out from this Landorus, but Leonard taking that in stride and now having a Fake Out available, as well as that Ghostium Z still intact.
So the Protect on the Gardevoir that turn means that the Aegislash on Leonard's end has a very, very safe, Shadow Ball or Never-Ending Nightmare option into that slot, especially with this Fake Out intact. This Incineroar could easily fake out the Landorus, which is the most threatening thing on the field right now. And Aegislash, won't take much damage from Gardevoir at all. Psychic will not break Substitute. Hyper Voice will, go through a Substitute, but do very little damage because it is in that shield form and resists. And so this Aegislash is looking like it's in a really good position right now.
And we even saw in previous matches that Gardevoir Hyper Voice at full power against Leonard's Incineroar would possibly bring that Incineroar in range of proccing that Pinch Berry. And so we see that Fake Out into Landorus, and then the Ghostium Z coming out of Leonard's Aegislash. And at this point, either Pokemon that is out on Preston's side, we've seen that Landorus takes a huge chunk of damage from that Ghostium Z, as well as that Aegislash, because it will be super effective against that Aegislash. We've already seen that it took a lot of damage.
Yeah, so it is going to go into this Aegislash. We'll easily be able to pick up this knockout. And so Preston will be left with just his Gardevoir and his Landorus against this Aegislash behind a substitute. And so if Leonard is able to find a way to safely close out this game, he'll be in a very great spot. He still has all 4 of his Pokemon left, I believe, and so he's got some pretty safe maneuvering options.
Yeah, and now being in that Blade form, he's going to take a little bit of extra damage from Hyper Voice, but he's still got the opportunity to King Shield here. And again, because Leonard has all 4 of his Pokemon, he can continue to cycle out Intimidates, and so it looks like Preston's really on the back foot here.
Yeah, I think the Landorus is already at the -1 attack, and so if Leonard does decide to switch out the Incineroar, recycle that Intimidate, preserve the Fake Out option, the Landorus will be down to -2 the next time Incineroar comes in. So its damage output is already being pretty severely limited.
And lazy Susan of Intimidates.
The swiveling office chair of Intimidates.
And the other thing to mention is that we haven't had Landorus burn its Z Crystal yet, so it still has the Groundium Z available. But now that we've got Amoonguss out on the field, it will kind of even not only just a hard redirect, something like the Rage Powder, which will force Preston's Pokemon to target the Amoonguss, but also maybe a soft redirect where it's not forcing Pokemon to focus on it, but maybe forcing Preston to at least choose to target that Amoonguss directly.
Good point. This Amoonguss, it is in range of a Psychic at this point. So if Gardevoir does decide to go for a Psychic, it will be able to knock out Amoonguss, but at the expense of taking a Shadow Ball most likely. And so that's a very good point. Amoonguss is great for, forcing redirection with Rage Powder, But a lot of times, you're kind of forced to target it anyway because it does have that spore option, and getting put to sleep is a pretty detrimental, status to be under. And so this Amoonguss, while it's not really threatening either Pokemon, offensively right now, it is in a spot where, Preston has to make sure it doesn't just put his entire team to sleep.
Yep, and we see Knockoff coming into Aegislash, preventing it from keeping its substitute up. And it looks like it should still have enough HP that it could get another substitute up if it wanted to, but it looks like it's going on the offensive, changing into that blade form, going for the Shadow Ball into Gardevoir, and it should do a huge amount of damage, bringing it in the red. And then Spore from Amoonguss coming right back out, again, with no Tapu Fini, bringing Misty Terrain, Landorus being up in the sky anyway, really susceptible to all of this Spore from this Amoonguss.
Right. So yeah, now this Landorus, is guaranteed to stay asleep this turn. The Gardevoir, it could potentially fire off another Hyper Voice. I imagine a Hyper Voice would knock out Aegislash in blade form here. But we've seen the Sludge Bomb from Leonard's Amoonguss, and so if Gardevoir does decide to go for Hyper Voice, the Amoonguss is free to fire off a Sludge Bomb into that Gardevoir, and so it's a pretty precarious position for Preston here. I think Leonard has a free knockout no matter what Preston decides to go for.
Yeah, and we see that Leonard understands what position Preston is in, so he doesn't decide to protect either Pokemon here. He just wants to make sure that he goes full offensive. We've seen the Sludge Bomb out of Amoonguss pick up KOs before, and it does so yet again, and now it's Landorus against the world.
Landorus at -1 attack, not really going to be able to knock out the Salamence before a couple frustrations will do the job. And so it looks like Leonard is going to take this set, coming back after losing to Preston and Swiss, and he will be your mid-season Showdown champion.
What an impressive display from these two players. Honestly, the adjustments here have been phenomenal. And we see that just changing your lead outs, changing your decision making. We saw that Leonard played a little bit riskier in the last rounds of Swiss, and choosing to go for Dragon Dances in front of Hyper Voices or just targeting down Gardevoir initially. But this time, Leonard playing a little bit more defensively and trying to make sure that he's in a very good position. And that's what kind of made it so that he could clear this out in finals 2-0. So that makes him our Collector's Cash mid-season champion. That does mean that he's going home with the full 50 CP as well as that $80.
Leonard, if you go to a mid-season Showdown and come back with more money than you left with, then I can't really complain about that. Preston also getting some money, $40 for him. Like we said earlier, Ethan and Brandon are their two top 4 players who will get $20 as well. So, great day for Leonard, if you ask me.
Yeah.
Come and play some Pokemon, get some money, get some championship points. I think at this point, it might have happened yesterday, but I believe that Leonard has secured his invite to the 2018 World Championships as well. And so it's been a pretty good weekend for him, I would say.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for us. Thank you guys so much for watching. This has been the mid-season Showdown at Collector's Cash in Lenexa, Kansas. That was finals, and your mid-season champion is Leonard Craft, and your runner-up was Preston Chew. Thank you guys so much for watching. We will see you guys for the next event.